Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this Cabinet meeting, unusually for us, not only afternoon, Friday rather than Tuesday. The issue we have before very time as any patient. I will start. Apologies for I have no announcement. Are there any declarations? I believe not. Move on then. Substantive item 4 on your report 106/25 local government reorganization. Recommendations. 1. Cabinet to agree statutory provides the best means high quality sustainable public services for Rutland, and 2. Cabinet to endorse that proposal. 8. I am moving 8 and will into item. Recommendation before B, which local government most strong area best worth reminding us that the government was quite clear Rutland had to reorganize that an authority of 1,000 people not meet its about 500,000. It is also are not sufficient area prizes county council, district council, unitary councils of and North East, and therefore are not in a had one or more authorities, then we would have considered the option. This did not. At the council meeting, doing nothing apart from writing. Given the government's criteria, simply acknowledge they will decide us state without us. Our residents, financially stable council. That means being in a council area less heavily council tax, being in an area with opportunities our residents and our councillors so told us they were worried about the reduction number of resultant council. Reduction in councillors given the boundary commission maximum size of council. But the options before you are not equal. Last night we also first time how significant place Rutland again 3 options of talk about. 1 in terms of the 2 in terms of neighbourhood, 1 in terms of it's which types terms that will help So what we're deciding this afternoon is whether to Rutland's next Secretary having introduced. Oh, sorry, I need to say. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ellis.
Reiterate the lack of finance last night. I'm very grateful. And that was very, and
Councillor. Thank you. Getting into a discussion of the options, I think like to. I think participated. I think there was a lot of points raised, and I'm proud to be a councillor, and I think comments that were raised, the way conducted were exemplary, and particular thanks to work from the task and having that that framework and that detailed analysis. Alison has helped to frame those, help us make those comparisons. Thanks to that. I think a year ago, the words local government reorganisation hadn't entered our vocabulary. I know everybody here well to thank them for all the work they've put working up these proposals, or working groups. So I think Rutland has done itself proud in actually analysing, working through, faced with. There was quite a lot of the points raised yesterday evening that I would with this sense of frustration done to us as a county, whereas actually we as a unit pension services, managing our budget well, so the feeling that actually and is the other thing I think came that the concerns about the lack of I think it's up to council and how we take that forward. We're debating that, debating the fact whether localisation will solve any of the issues government intervening for and for adult social services, because rearranging the boundaries here, and in terms that's not what I think that did come debate last night, and I would to that was all very well expressed, and I think that whole context. There was some mention of actually Scotland's case for in terms of what we felt, perhaps the government, and I personally would better of that actually that goes along ever proposed. Perhaps come back. I wanted to say that first. All right, I saw Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Also like to say I was very impressed last night. Most of the comments by councillors, some substantial contributions and very relevant ones. And it made me think, I took notes on of most of them. As far as I could see from the submissions that we were given, the financial stability was the main point most of concerned with. The democratic deficit was clearly an issue that was substantial. And also the lack of guidance to give us, and the lack of time to being given to enable to work these through to the benefit of everybody concerned. We looked at the city situation, and by consensus of everybody that was there, and it's my view as well, we were just peripherally mentioned. There was no substantive benefit. It was basically about how they wanted to expand and how they saw themselves in the future. As far as I could see with the county council submission, and I can agree with other people last night, it was basically about their reliance on how we were going to make cuts that would appeal to the government, and we were merely a bolt-on to their application. What I was disappointed was the willingness to abstain. This is a major issue for all this county. It is probably one of the biggest decisions that members will make in their political history with this council. Although it was not a decision that was of any force, it was illustrative. It's still a decision that I think the residents would have considered was right, that members made a positive statement. They made a positive decision on what was on offer, not simply to leave it on one side and abstain so that it may gain some political advantage in the future. That's how I saw it. I don't think we can ignore the situation that we have, and that is of the three options. We have no other options. We're not included any other options. The only option that seemed acceptable, that to me and to a lot of other councillors that had considered our opinion, worked with us, and we had contributed to, was the North City South. We have to do, in the end of the day, what is best for our residents on the options that we are offered. We can't go fantasising on other alternatives which are not there. On that basis alone, I think it is the only option that is available to us is the North City South.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
In a similar vein to my Cabinet colleagues, I would also like to thank all of the members for the discussion last night, but that obviously wholly engaged with the options that have been put before us, and also I thought the Scrutiny Task and Finish group was particularly helpful in our thoughts. This is a decision none of us want to make. As has been pointed out, we'd like to stay as we are, and that came through quite strongly in the survey. However, I don't think we have an option. And what we want is, well, we don't want it, the least worst option. And we don't want to put Rutland at risk by making no option. One of the points made in the discussion was that Rutland needs to be the integral part and not just an add-on to one of these options. And I think as a unitary authority, we could have quite an influential role. I also heard that because we will have a ward council have a much larger population, democratic accountability will be an issue. And that brings me to the point about neighbourhood areas. And that was much more developed, I thought, in the North City South proposal than in the others. And It's important, I think, as Councillor Waller said, to preserve a sense of place and influence. In the survey, finance was the #1 concern. And I think, again, the North City South proposal has much more developed about council tax harmonisation. Unfortunately, there's a lack of detail in all of the options about savings that could be achieved. The other point that came across strongly, and again, this was in the survey that was done, was to the Rutland identity and keep our ceremonial status. And actually, in option 2 that the government put out, that is said to be, it will be kept too. Criterion 3 has it as having good, high-quality public services. And we do have high-quality public services in Rutland. And we should be proud of our achievements. We have a good model of social services. And again, social care is embedded in the proposal by North City South more than the others. I think also we should perhaps think about the possible advantages of going into a bigger authority. The economy, greater employment, council tax harmonisation, so it might be stabilised or even come down. And again, I think this fits the North City South option. So, as I say, unfortunately, we can't stay the same. And I think the North City South is the least worst option for us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wise.
As usual, by going last, everybody sort of more or less said what I was going to say. I think Councillor Johnson might be pipping me to the last place. I agree with Councillor Powell that it's fair to say we don't deserve to be here. We run a tight ship, are an exemplar authority on many fronts, and would wish to remain independent. And I think I also agree that the meeting last night was very keen that we make our feelings known. We would like our identity retained in some way. However, if strategic authorities are where the big money is going to go, they are going to be creaming off a large amount of highways, transport, planning income. We would not remain as we are now. What we're responsible for and what we have the money to do would change. And I do wonder how little Rutland would survive in a don't know how many million strategic authority. And that does worry me. We also need to be very careful about the representativeness. When people are saying, my residents say, we are of course listening to the most vocal residents. And not all of us are hearing the same messages. Some of us are getting very different messages about who they want to be with. Many of those opinions were voiced before they had read any of the bids. And in fact, some people are still voicing things having never read a bid. And I think we need to be very careful about it. A lot was mentioned last night about our loss of democratic input by councillors. We also need to be aware there are a lot of district councils in Leicestershire facing the same thing. We're not the only one that is facing a reduction. They are equally well worried about losing their identity. Some of those districts have sort of brought themselves up having an identity for a long time. And I do wonder if that's why the North City South bid because it involved those same district councils, had a stronger sense of recognising the identity of its component parts. And for me, better served that part of the recommendation about sustainable public services for Rutland, because they were also worried about sustainable public services for the North West and sustainable public services for Melton and sustainable public services for Market Harborough, because they were all worried about their own part. As such, I felt put together a stronger argument. I was not convinced about the County Council's argument of the benefits of scale. I felt that that was in danger of just cutting everything for the sake of economy. I liked the North City South emphasis on the neighbourhoods, how they were going to look after us. We have also heard about how we have not got a lot in common. If we think about the North Leicestershire and Rutland, there's not a lot that we have in common with Leicestershire and Colville. But I haven't got a poem, unlike last night. But I would just like to say that if I had a rugby team of fly halves, I wouldn't win many scrums. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I hope I'm coming over on the mic. I should be. Yes, I wanted to attend last night's council meeting because I wanted to understand the quality of the debate and the views that were there. And I was interested in the thought about Rutland still trying to be Rutland. And although I think Rutland does actually do smaller as better very well, the common sense argument in me says that if we simply fail to put a bid in because we protest about the whole thing, then that's just going to be totally ignored. And I think it's much better for us to be adult and express a preference than it is to throw the toys out of the pram. In terms of the quality debate, there were two emphases yesterday, which were really on about Rutland, and I think we can preserve Rutland's identity, but it will be up to us to make sure that happens. So the neighbourhoods in Rutland and the councillors that serve Rutland will need to make sure that they help us preserve Rutland's identity. I also think that we've got a period of time between now and when the changeover is due to happen, and during that time we should make sure we take every step we can do, whether it's prosaic or whether it's actual, to make sure we preserve what is Rutland. Because it is defined as an area of England, and it has a quite distinct characteristic, and I think that's definable and to a degree protectable. The argument about representation is obviously true in the sense that we're a small county council and we've got 27 members, and the average size of the ward is very low compared to the target size of ward in the new authorities. But I think that's just a question of mathematics, and I suspect what the government will want is that there is an evenness and equality about the number of residents per council, per councillor, and I think that's really just about representation within the new combined authorities. So in terms of last night's debate, I thought it was useful. I don't think that it has absolutely changed my mind. I think it's added to where I thought I was in some ways, and has given some nuance, which is useful. In terms of the proposals before us, Leicester County Council's proposal, I find, frankly, a bit arrogant, in the sense that it just assumes that larger is better. And I don't actually think that's the case at all. I think coming from a smaller county like Rutland, we appreciate the ability to identify, and I do not think that larger is better. I also don't think that a dominant authority in a future strategic authority is not a good idea. I think it's really important, and I'm assuming government will be thinking of the role of each constituent authority in a strategic authority. And if any one particular authority dominates, that would be very difficult. So I'll say a word about the savings that Leicester County Council appear to be identifying. Leicester City's proposal I found very Leicester City centric, maybe not surprisingly, but it was very much, this is what we want, and actually we don't care that much about everybody else. So I don't particularly think that deals with the issues for residents. I think it again, it was sort of arrogant in its own way, and I think those two proposals taken together, whether you might prefer the larger donut or the smaller donut, Leicester City expanded or not, what those proposals together both do is say, if you take one of these proposals, all you're going to do is preserve the old hierarchy and the old way of doing things. And I think this is an opportunity to shake things up slightly better than that. And I think we need that, because if we are going to change in the way is proposed, we need to make sure that we do look at things with fresh eyes. The North City South proposal, I think, is the most professional of all. It's not surprising, maybe, because it was born out of a really good deal of cooperation between the authorities involved, and I think it shows. I think it's very professional. It's in effect a prospectus. It's written as such. It's very approachable. It explains things very sensibly in plain English, and I think it comes across extremely well. And I think because of the way that it takes the old Leicestershire and it splits it up, is actually much preferable to keeping Leicestershire County Council. It gives slightly lower size of authority than the government has said is ideal, but I think the sizes of authority are within the boundaries of, or in the scope of being realistic. And I think it would be important, said before, that any one authority doesn't necessarily dominate in a new combined authority. In terms of the benefits arising from merger, consolidation, or whatever, I think everybody needs to be very careful with the way the financial benefits are calculated. And not surprisingly, given my interest as a portfolio of finance here, I'm always quite interested to see how people approach things like savings, because when you make savings, you should also make sure that you are transforming the process of the way you do things in order to make sure the savings are sustainable, and that you improve your ability to extract the savings whilst providing residents with the service that is required and wanted. And I think, again, Leicester County Council's sort of, we can save the most, therefore we're the best proposal, is a bit shallow. I don't think they demonstrate really that they've got as much experience in transformation, frankly, as even we have. I know the numbers are smaller, but actually the number of noughts doesn't matter. What matters is the way you do things. And again, I think Leicester City's proposal is just very Leicester City centric, and so all they care about is getting more residents and more council tax. It appears to me, being slightly cynical about. So I think the way the North City South proposal looks at the savings that are potentially there is a rounded proposal. It talks about neighbourhoods, it talks about working with people, it talks about transforming services in order to extract savings, which is exactly the right process. It talks about prevention, all the right elements to make sure that you hit your targets and you provide the services you want. And Rutland has got good experience in achieving those. So overall, I think the ability to extract benefits whilst making sure residents have the right service is really very important, and therefore I come down quite clearly on the side of the North City South proposal. In terms of the debate last night about writing a letter to the Secretary of State, then I think I'm supportive of that, because I think that would be quite useful, because it would just set out the position that we have and I think it keeps us on the right adult side, in that we are engaging, but we are also saying, look, we'd rather not be here. We think we run a very good authority, thank you very much, and we think that there are dangers in the reorganisation that either you're not recognising or you're not admitting to recognising, and that there will be work for 5 to 10 years to come and beyond that will echo from all these changes.
Thank you. Councillor Powell, if you wanted to come back in.
Come back in. Again, I think it's interesting, the debate about identity, and that did come through very strongly from residents. We could have a very large philosophical debate about what makes identity, but I think, as other colleagues have said, doing what we can in this area in terms of the, retaining the ceremonial status as an element of that, and other matters that we can do, I think should be highlighted, and that was in the bids. But and it is a lot down to local residents and the neighbourhoods to actually carry on with that identity, which is seen as important to people. What we're talking about here is obviously the reorganisation of boundaries in how local government delivers services. And I remember right at the beginning, the devolution agenda, and looking at it, the combined mayoral authorities. So I think our job is where Rutland and its residents sits within that, in terms of the voice and unlocking the benefits of that, the potential and the opportunities that come with that. Looking at those, the different proposals, I mean, the thing that struck me, they weren't directly comparable. Each of the proposals put forward its own case against the other ones, using the figures and the cost savings that were presumably drawn from the same basic information, but came to different conclusions about the savings. So whilst I am a very much a numbers person, I realise that we're living in a very uncertain world, and those cases can be made from those the same basic figures. I think even I noticed in the Leicestershire ones that even when they were counteracting the North City South proposal, they came up with slightly different population figures as well, which was also interesting. But I think the North City South seemed to me to be, put together in terms of that financial information that was a bit rather lacking in the others, which we were talking about. And to me, is where Rutland sits in that, looking at that overall map about, do you divide it into 2, do you divide it into 3? And to me, it's having those 3 equitable areas, to me, makes the most logical sense in terms of Rutland's overall voice through those areas into the bigger picture. And yeah, so from that sort of just overall point of view, as I say, I do believe there are efficiency savings to be made in local government. How you do that, but as Councillor Johnson has said, that's more about systems and processes and streamlining and delivery rather than just size. And I think we, as the Rutland councillors, in the next year, 18 months, and with the new whatever organisation we become part of, the shadow is, our role is to really embed the good things about Rutland in whatever structure we have. And on the point, we could say, well, it's not our decision anyway, let's just leave the Secretary of State to make that decision. We could sit back and do that, but I don't think that's the right thing to do. Even if whatever we decide is not the decision that's been made, I feel that we as councillors have a responsibility to endorse one of those proposals.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else want to come back? No. I think I would like to sum up this part by reiterating thanks that many of you have given to the work of the Task and Finish group and the members last night who were making very thoughtful comments about the three proposals before us and the process we had to go through. I agree with you, and the Task and Finish group's work, I think, was very helpful in the debate last night. I think I also want to support what some of you have said about the work our officers have done. And I think one of the reasons that the North City South proposal looks more rounded is because of the input from our officers. Our own Section 151 officer leading on the financial work. The city and the council brought in external consultants to do their finances. And I think it showed. I think it showed the difference between somebody who can add up sums and somebody who understands what that money is meant to be spent on. And I think why in the North City South proposal, the clarity of what the neighbourhoods would be was there simply because not a million miles from what we're doing in Rutland. And we were able to, or our officers were able to explain to their officer colleagues what that looked like. And I was able to explain to the district leaders how it was subtly different from some of the work they had done recently and in the past within their communities, and therefore it needed to be more rounded. Fortunately, we didn't get the same opportunities in the end. Many of you have talked about financial sustainability, have touched on what would happen if we stayed as we are. Well, how long is a piece of string? Who's got the crystal ball? Whatever other aphorism you might want to use. I think the reality is we have seen, on my time on the council, I came on the council in 2011, a consistent reduction in our government grant year on year. And the ad hoc grants that become available, whether we bid for them or they're given to us, are becoming smaller and smaller as well for us. And as a consequence, our council tax has been going up and it's now just under 80% of spend. If that trend continues, it won't be long before it hits 100%. And I think we need to bear that in mind. And it's not because we're not well run. It's not because we don't have good services. It's because we don't have a lot of deprivation, which is one of the triggers for government funding. And in part, it is an economy of scale question. We don't have the economies of scale that some authorities do have. And so being in a bigger grouping would be advantageous. And indeed, I had begun informal discussions with a number of neighbouring authorities well before the white paper was published to see whether there was any appetite for Rutland to grow. So it was something that we were aware of. I certainly wouldn't have moved at the pace, though, the government has pushed us in by any stretch of the imagination, but we are where we are. I think, though, we have to recognise that we are not the only people discussing this. All the other district councils in Leicestershire will be looking at these three proposals, as will, of course, the city and the county. The city and the county are in relatively easy position. Whatever they think they want, that's what they'll go for. The districts, we've got to get everybody to agree, and there could well be, during their equivalence of our cabinet meeting, be some amendments, adjustments that they want to make. So in a moment, I'm going to propose an additional recommendation. But before I do that, because it's been proposed and seconded, recommendation 1.3.1, the Cabinet to agree which proposal for local government reorganisation most strongly meets the statutory criteria and provides the best means of ensuring long-term financial sustainability and high-quality sustainable public services for Rutland. From what I have heard, you are all saying the North City South proposal is the proposal that most strongly meets criteria. I see a show of hands just to confirm that is unanimous. And therefore, I think 1.3.1, we have agreed that now. And 1.3.2, this is where I'm going to slightly amend it, if I may, is for Cabinet to endorse that proposal for submission to the Secretary of State, but add into that as an amendment, delegate authority to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Leader of the Council to continue working with the Leicestershire District and Borough Councils to agree and finalise the document and then submit the final proposal to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government prior to the 28th of November 2025 deadline. I have a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor John. Now, there is an amendment to 1.3.2 added on. Does anyone want to speak to it? Councillor Powell.
Thank you. The deadline is next Friday, so there is 1 week in which to make any amendments. I'm very concerned that we might have what amendments might be proposed, made. They'd all have to be agreed by all the authorities, I'm assuming, and I'm a bit uncomfortable that the draft proposal that everyone has seen, as everyone's looked at last night and today, might be changed. I accept it might be not substantive, but then there's a bit of a subjective judgment about what is substantive. So in principle, okay, if there are, you know, spelling mistakes or whatever that might need to be changed, but I'm not comfortable with any further changes to it, and I don't see practically how that can be achieved within a week if you've got to get all the districts to agree to that as well.
The district leaders are meeting on Wednesday, and they will have all had their cabinet meetings by then. And I'm quite concerned that one of them, us, might come up with a, well, can't we move this section to here? Or we would want that moved there. And without this, without delegating authority to me in conjunction with the Chief Executive, who will be at the same meeting, that we won't actually be able to approve anything even like that. And so it's in order to facilitate what's going through. I've heard what everybody said, both here and last night, and I think I understand that the thrust of it, it's keep it as what we've seen. I'm very, very worried that we won't be able to sign up to it because there might be some, I would consider a minor change, but I appreciate other people might not. I'm certainly not going to agree to anything that's substantially different or changes the emphasis. But I would remind you that our officers have had a significant role in shaping this. They wouldn't let me do anything that changed what satisfied their professional judgment, I'm sure. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, can I just suggest, because I'm mainly supportive of that suggestion, but given Councillor Powell's and which we discussed earlier, is it worth inserting something like without changing the overall meaning or something like that to make sure that it's quite clear that what we're talking about are minor amendments, not major amendments? Do we think it does that already?
I'll call in the Chief Executive on this point, please.
Yeah, it was your point about the definition of substantive changes. Obviously, it's not intended to do any substantive changes, but I think it's important that any changes are transparent. So, do is before any are signed off by their share with Cabinet, so that you can challenge the nature of any change if changes are. But you're right. I assume it will be changing a sentence to make greater sense or changing spellings.
Or making sure that Rutland County Council has capital letters for the R, the C and the C. Councillor Powell, are you content with that explanation?
To a certain degree, yes. I obviously trust that those changes are there. It's just from the point of view of having had that document, and it's obviously, there's been a lot of work on it. There's been a lot of discussions between the various leaders of the authorities and the officers, that actually I would have hoped that tweaks about capital letters would have been done by now. But I wouldn't want anything to be a deal breaker between the various authorities. But I would infinitely prefer if we've got what we've got and that goes in, because I think it's important. If we've had a document, we've looked at it, okay, it won't be perfect because there will be things that need to be changed, and actually I would actually prefer that we you know, stick at where we are. I'm not going to, if we need to put that in just to protect ourselves, but I would hope that there would be, I don't see why at this stage, with a week to go, that we aren't confident in this final document.
I think essentially we are confident in the final document, but we are aware that there are a number of partners in this exercise, and we need to give ourselves the ability to respond to whatever might come out from our partners. And that's really essentially what this is doing.
Yes, I agree on that. As I say, if somebody wants to make a minor change, and that is important to them, and we accept that that's a minor change, I think it's more from the other districts that we want to make sure that we're all aligned if they are supporting this proposal as well.
I am fairly confident that none of them will want to make anything that's a substantive change. They will have said that before this point in time. All that we've been doing for the last 2 months, or huge job, but what we've been doing for the last 2 months is ensuring that the document actually reflects what we were saying earlier in the year. That's quite a difficult process, but it's been through a number of iterations. Just I want to make sure that we're not tripped up at the last hurdle, because I don't have the power to say, yes, you can do this with Chief Executive, obviously. So, this has been proposed. I'll read it out again. Delegate authority to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Leader of the Council. Continue working with the Leicestershire District and Borough Councils to agree and finalise the document, and then submit the final proposal to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government prior to the 28th of November 2025 deadline. That's been proposed and seconded. It follows on from 1.3.2, also proposed and seconded. So it's an amendment to that, an addition to that. Can I see all those in favour, please?
That's unanimous, Chair. That's
Thank
carried.
you. Now, before we close the meeting, I'd like... Sorry, Chair, you've... Oh, sorry. Motion. I don't know, I said I was... Okay, so the substantive motion is, thank you, for Cabinet to endorse that proposal, i.e. North City South, for submission to the Secretary of State and delegates authority, etc. That is now the substantive motion. All those in favour, please.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Now, before I... Sorry.
Sorry, Chair, can I just clarify, are we encompassing the letter with that?
That's what I'm just about to
All
say.
right, okay, thank you.
Before I close the meeting, I have heard comments about a letter. I don't want to send a letter with our submission because I think that will muddy the waters. I would be more than happy and indeed would be keen to send a letter to the Secretary of State separately from the submission and to make that letter public so everybody knows what I've been saying. Are you content with that commitment from me, Cabinet? Yep, nods all round. So I don't need a motion. Okay, thank you. In which case, I close the meeting at 14:50. 14:51, is that? Oh yes, so it does. 14:51. Thank you.